Today I'm going to show you how to paint Necron Tomb Blades with all the weapon options. It's coming right up.
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to learn about Necrons and more, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so today I'm going to show you how to paint Necron Tomb Blades because I've just painted 9 Tomb Blades with all of the weapon and Wargear options. So I thought I would share how I paint my Tomb Blades in quite a traditional Necron colour scheme, but you can easily adapt this to any dynasty that you wish, which I'll explain about during the video. It's a nice, easy way to paint Necrons, so let's go table down and have a look how I do it. Okay, so I'm ready to paint my Tomb Blade. Now, as you can see, I've got all of the weapon options and Wargear options there to paint as well. This is a fully magnetised Tomb Blade. I've also done a little conversion on this section because I'm not a fan of the ball on this front section above the head. So I have actually got a couple of tutorial videos on how to do both of those things, and I'll link those up in the description below for you. Now you'll notice I've actually glued the driver into the vehicle. Now I know that does make it more difficult to paint, so if you're not using this particular paint scheme that I'm using, you may want to do sub-assembly. However, with my very easy paint scheme, this isn't going to be an issue because we are going to dry brush it. Now I've got my Artist Opus dry brush here, which is what I'm going to use. However, you don't have to use this particular brush. Any dry brush would do, so a Games Workshop brush or Army Painter. In actual fact, you don't even have to use a dedicated dry brush. You could use, say, an old base brush. The key thing is that the bristles here are nice and soft. If they're soft, it makes the dry brushing a lot easier. Okay, so let's get this guy painted. Okay, so before we actually paint this miniature, we need to prime it, and you'll need to prime it in black for this particular paint scheme. I went in with my spray can black paint, and then afterwards I touched up any of the misses with my black paint because sometimes the spray can doesn't always hit all areas, and because of the way we're going to paint this model, we really need it to be black all over. You do have the option to either spray or just paint it silver and then maybe use a black wash over the top. However, the way that I'm going to do it, I believe gives a more realistic metal finish, and you don't necessarily have to use washes. You still can if you want to, but you don't have to. Okay, so first of all we're going to use Iron Breaker. I've got some of that in my wet palette here with my dry brush. I'm going to put some on my dry brush. And then I've got this little cloth here. I'm going to take the paint off by gently doing a little rubbing, and then I'm going to check that I've got no big splodges on this piece of tissue. You could use your hand here, your thumb, to take the paint off, but if you've got oily hands, sometimes that can go onto the brush. So I use a tissue, and then all you need to do is gently go over the model and the silver paint will start to come off. Now you're not necessarily trying to fill this out totally. It doesn't matter if it looks a little bit blotchy because that will help us have the effect of metal. And we are going to do another coat over the top of this. So just go over all of the model with this dry brush and then we'll be back. Okay, so that is that layer done. I've painted silver all over and it's looking pretty cool. It is looking a little bit patchy, but that's okay. Not only is that going to give us our metal look, but of course we've got another coat of paint to go over the top, which will make it look a little bit better. Now the only things I haven't dry brushed in silver are the bits that I want to be black. So obviously I've got my own little system for how I paint things, and a lot of my guns have black sections, so I've left some of the guns black where I know that's how I'm going to paint them. Okay, let's move on to the next layer. Okay, so we're ready for the next stage. Now on my Necrons I have 2 different silvers, one for the vehicles and one for the infantry. So I'm going to do the vehicle first, and the colour we are going to use is Lead Belcher. So I've got some of that in my wet palette already. I'm going to use my dry brush and we're going to re-dry brush everything that we've done already. Exactly the same format on the brush, on the cloth, and then take it off on the tissue and then go over what we've done with a dry brush. Now this will really make this model look good now because it's going to keep that sort of blotchiness that we've already got, but it will make it a little bit more consistently silver everywhere. And the great thing about this system is you don't have to use washes because we've got a metal look already. You could use a wash as well, either in the recesses or all over, but you don't need it at all. This works very well. So I'm going to do this all over the model and over all of the accessories with the exception of the warrior inside, and then I'll be back. Okay, so that's layer done. Of course, I'm still leaving some of the areas black where I'm going to have black sections on my guns, and it's time to paint this guy inside, which I'm going to match in to my original paint scheme. Okay, so when I started the hobby in 2001, we were on this codex, and it was this picture on front of the codex that got me hooked to Necrons. And we had a good number of choices when it came to colour schemes. Now obviously back in the days we didn't have dynasties, so these aren't necessarily dynasty colour schemes, these are just choices of colour schemes that you could maybe go for. And I had a good look at this codex and I chose this colour scheme just here. So I painted him in the colours that they list here, which is chainmail, which of course is now ironbreaker. It then says do an armour wash of black. Now I didn't know what washes was back then. I actually went in and I painted all of the recesses with black paint. And then finally it says mithril silver, which is effectively now replaced with runefang steel, and this gives a nice shiny look. So what we're going to do is paint our driver using runefang steel. Now this was the unit which I painted first for my army, but then when it came to other units like a destroyer, I actually decided to paint the destroyer body with bolt gun metal, or now as it's called lead boucher, and then that gave me a bit of a difference between the vehicles and the infantry. So we have our runefang steel in our wet palette there, and just a note, you really have to shake it before you start using it. And now I'm using my small dry brush and I'm effectively just going to dry brush this warrior that's driving this tomb blade in this silver colour. So I'm going to gently dry brush all over. Now we are looking for a silver colour, but also a little bit blotchy as well. In other words, what we don't want to do is take out any of those black recesses by dry brushing too much, but then we want to build up that nice silver colour. Now when I was younger I had no idea what I was doing painting miniatures, and after I did this particular layer I felt that the model was too shiny, so I did something else which I'll show you in a second. I'm just going to finish dry brushing the whole miniature and then I'll be back. Okay, that's done, and obviously where I said whole of the miniature I meant the whole of the warrior itself. So we've got a nice T800 sort of look there, but like I said, when I first started I thought it was a bit shiny, so I did something a bit unusual, but it seemed to work quite well. So what I did is I got some of the lead boucher paint and I re-dry brushed over some of the big sections, like his arms here for example, and what it did, it gave a little bit more of an oily type feel to that particular section. Now I didn't do it all over, I just selected the big sections, so the thighs, the forearms, the back, and I did the back of the head as well, but I didn't touch the actual face. So that's what I did, and like I said, it just gave a little bit more of an oily feel to the model. Okay, so that's the silver done and it's really looking like metal. Now you could, if you wanted to, go in and just wash in all of the recesses. There's no need to wash all over because we've got that mottled look anyway. However, on certain miniatures I will go in with the black paint and just paint in some black, usually on the ribs of the vehicle. So this little rib here and this one here I'm going to paint black. I'll probably go into the warrior body where any of the dry brush has got into the grooves. So I'm just going to put some black paint in those little recesses just to add a little bit more depth and detail to the miniature and just make this metalwork that we've got pop a little. As I said, I'm not going to go in all of the recesses, but just the big ones basically. So yeah, I'm going to do that all over and we will be back. Okay, so that's all done, and I didn't have to do too much, to be fair. I did look at the ribs of the Warrior, but they're still black, so that was fine. So I really only went into these little spine sections on the vehicle, and as you can see here, it's just improved the vehicle just slightly, just making it pop a little bit more. So we are ready for the next stage. Okay, so that's the bulk of the miniature painted. We are ready to detail this miniature. Now, depending on the dynasty that you're painting, this is where you can change the miniature to match your dynasty. So if you were painting these with Nihilic dynasty, you'd go in and paint it with blue details. If you were going to do Mefrit dynasty, then you'd go in with orange details. However, I have my own dynasty colours, and I'm going to be using green, gold and white. I'm going to start with Warpstone Glow Green as a base coat. Now if you were painting these blue, you'd start off with a similar blue colour. This is a mid-tone green, so you would start with a mid-tone blue. So I'm going to base coat everything that I want to be green, then we'll be back. Okay, so that's the base coat of the green done, and of course there's not too much green there because most of my army is just painted silver, so this is more of a spot colour. However, with the base coats done, we are now ready for the next colour, which is mute green. So I'm going to have a chat about how I'm going to highlight the green. Now I'm going to use several techniques to highlight the green, starting with a dry brush. I'm going to dry brush these little energy sections at the back. That works very well with a little dry brush. And then the rest of the green will be layered, leaving our original base coat in the recesses. Now you may be able to see that the little green rods, or at least what I would like to have as green rods, I've actually base coated them in a different colour. I've base coated those in Caliban green. And the reason for that is I went to one of the Gauss guns which I previously painted, and I actually put the Caliban green in the little grooves rather than the Warpstone green. So I just duplicated what I'd already done in my army so that it all matches in. Now you can see I've got my Immortal here which has the green rods in. Now I'm a big fan of green rods, so I tried to paint these like this the best that I could. In actual fact, when it came to the Tesla gun, which I've got one of the Tesla guns here, again I tried to paint them to look like a green rod the best that I could. So talking of Tesla, on the Tesla guns I am literally just going to layer over the top of that with our mute green, just leaving the recess. I have added some green on the side sections just here and also along this little pole. And then once again on this gun here, I've just matched this to the rest of my army. So particle weapons are black and silver, the only green is on this little section at the bottom. That's just how I do my army. I have of course put green on the orbs there, and on the actual Tomb Blade himself I've done little eyelet here, his chest plate, the little orb which he's holding on to, which I painted with a 000 brush to get it in because it's quite difficult to get in, but I did do it, and this little section just on the top there. So I am now ready to highlight everything. The key thing here when you're highlighting is to leave the original base coat colour just slightly exposed and then paint the next colour on the rest of it, and that will give quite a nice little contrast glowing look. Of course you could go in and glaze and blend these particular layers, but I'm not going to do that because they're so small it doesn't really need it. Okay, so let's get highlighting the green. Okay, so that's the second coat of green down. Now both of those coats of course I did more than one layer, so I did 2 or 3 thin coats, but we are now finished with the green. Now of course you could add your additional colour even further than I've done, maybe on some of the panels on the vehicle here. I mean, whatever you want to do, please feel free to do so. Painting over this silver is actually quite easy. Just do 2 or 3 thin coats. Right, next I'm going to go in with the black paint and block in all of the areas on the guns that I want to be black, and of course I'm going to be very careful not to go over the green that I've already painted. I find the black is a nice contrast to the silver, so if you want to do that as well, then please do. Okay, so that is the black all laid down, and as you can see it's really neatened up the paint job, and also of course made a nice contrast between the silver and the black. Now at the moment the black isn't highlighted, and that will be our next stage. However, I just wanted to show you this because I've just made a new wet palette up. My other one was getting a little bit old and smelly, so this is just a Chinese takeaway dish, obviously with a lid. In the bottom we've got a sponge, and then we've got some kitchen roll or tissue paper, and then on the top we've got some baking paper, also known as perchant paper. Now I've also got some paint on there, as you can see. That's our next colour, which is lead belcher. So we've got that on our palette. We are going to do some more dry brushing. However, this time we're going to take our dry brush and do a very, very gentle dry brush over the black. We don't want to turn the black back into metal. In actual fact, I'm not going to hit every single edge of the black, just some random edges, almost making it like chipping. So we're going to put some paint on our brush. I'm going to take pretty much all of it off. We want this to be as little as possible on this brush. And then we're going to take our little gun options, and we are gently going to just dry brush just in random areas. Obviously try not to get it on any green, but just bring a few little extra details to the black. Then do that all over and we will be ready for the next stage. Okay, so that's all done. It is very subtle, but it does help just give that black a little bit more depth. So that's my main paint scheme done. I've got a couple of spot colours which I use sometimes on my Necrons, which is a gold colour and also a white colour. The white doesn't make it on all of my miniatures, the gold makes it on most, and it is going to make it onto this tomb blade. So I'm going to use shining gold for the next coat, which is the colour I've always used for my army. However, this paint is discontinued and you can't buy it anymore. I have to put out a massive thank you to the 3 people from the Wargamers Unification group who basically sent me their old pots of this colour, so thank you to you 3, I really appreciate it and it's been really useful. Okay, so what I'm going to paint gold is this little section on the top piece which goes up here. Once that's painted I can glue it into place because I've now painted the orb. I'm also going to paint this little symbol on the side, on both sides, with this gold colour. So I'm going to base coat it with the shining gold. I'll give it a little wash of black, and then I'll go in and highlight it with shining gold and ironbreaker mixed together, just a very subtle little highlight, and then the tomb blade will be finished. Okay, so here they are on their bases. We've got 9 tomb blades with all of the weapon options and the Wargear options. I really hope that this video was useful to you, even if you don't follow my scheme exactly. Hopefully you got some good tips from it. Now what I'm going to do next is link you up to some of my other Necron Tomb Blade videos. How to convert, how to build, and how to magnetize. So check those videos out next, and I'll see you in the next one. Beam me up!